Hello and welcome to Game Changers with me, Vicki Abelson, and my guest today is Denny Tedesco, who I've been chasing you for a while, Denny, huh?
Well, we've tried our best during COVID.
You know, yeah, and you've been a busy guy. I wanted to talk to you about COVID because you've gotten a lot of work done in the middle of this. What were you were in the middle of making this documentary on the immediate family when this started, right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I was thinking about this yesterday. You and I met. We met at the NAMM show.
Yes, we did.
This is where it gets hard because even though we know where COVID stands, days or weeks or years,
right?
I can't remember. So it was the end of 2019. No,
right. No,
beginning of 2020.
Correct.
It was the NAMM show.
Right.
And at that point, I had been shooting the immediate family documentary since August. And we were just at the NAMM show and we were just about to go to Sundance. And there was this talk about a virus kind of thing.
Right.
China, some Wuhan or something.
Right.
And it's so funny because for anybody that's ever been to the NAMM show, one of my favorite quotes is from the drummer Hal Blaine, who hated going in. He
really?
Goes, it's a human petri dish.
Really? Because of germs he hated it?
Yeah. He goes, I always get sick everywhere. Every time I get home, I get sick. So, okay.
God.
But it's so funny, and sure enough, it got worse.
Oh man, did it get worse? And you know what's interesting, Denny? That was like at the end. Was it? It was mid-January, I think, the NAMM show.
Yeah, probably even, yeah.
And so people were already getting it, and
yeah.
I
kind of, yeah.
Go ahead. It was kind of.
No, I was just. I think we were also in belief that it wasn't going to get to us here in this country at that point.
I think that's what we thought.
Distant. It was like there was some far out disease that we're not going to get.
But it didn't take long because I went to a Wild Honey concert 2 weeks later, I think it was maybe a few weeks. Anyway, I hugged Jackson Browne, and a week later he divulged that he had COVID. And so it was happening, you know, we just weren't really on top of it. So how did the pandemic, it must have impacted making this documentary, I imagine.
It impacted, I think, everybody. I mean, obviously it impacted everybody, but what was interesting about the doc we were working on,
right?
At that point, in a lot of ways, we were lucky because we had filmed all the artists at that point. I started with Carole King. I interviewed Jackson, and I interviewed James Taylor, Phil Collins, Linda Ronstadt.
Oh
and,
my God.
And Lou Adler and all these folks at that point.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, we were so lucky because it's not easy doing interviews on Zoom. It's, you know, yes, if you're doing an interview, it's great, but you can't blow this up to go on a screen, you know. And
so yeah, what did you do about that?
Oh, we avoided like every which way. I did not want to Zoom, you know, interviews. We've done a few, like Neil Young. Well, you do what Neil Young is going to want to do. I'll take anything from Neil. Even if, you know, that's the thing is sometimes it's not about the picture. It's really about the message.
Right.
And, you know, so yeah, you could survive with a Zoom. But what happened was after a few months.
But you had already done all those big interviews prior to the, okay.
Yeah, that was all done before. So thank God, because I don't think, you know, it would have been very difficult to see Linda Ronstadt in the situation because, you know, of her illness.
Right.
You know, she's not going to let us up there. I wouldn't. Right. And,
right.
You know, all of our friends were all of, you know, above 65 and above, you know, we didn't want to go there. So what we did is we made sure we were really safe, and I had to go get the guys. You know, I had to go get Lee and Leland and Russ and Danny and Waddy and Steve, and we just did it slowly, just a sound man and my DP, and we just went, you know, made sure we tested and made sure we, you know, were clean. But that was the way to do it, and slowly.
So that was what you had left, were interviewing the guys themselves?
Pretty much. And then there were times that we had questions and we sent them to like Keith Richards, and he sent a fabulous video back from his iPhone. And I
Wow.
gotta say, it's so funny because you look at that interview, go, that was good. Obviously, he's done it a few times, it's
Right.
lit. And I realize it's lit, it's backlit, he's kind of perfectly, so it's perfect,
Wow.
but, but we did Steve, we've done so many, did Stevie Nicks,
Wow.
Tom Waits, not Tom Waits, I'm so sorry, Lyle Lovett. I don't know why I said Tom Waits, but there's a few we did by Zoom, but what we did is, we're working with it. It's not easy, but we're working with it.
But you know what, Denny? I think there's a new acceptance
Yes.
from the whole world. No, we've all been through this together. We've all
Yeah.
survived this. So, well, we haven't all survived, but those of us
Right.
who have survived, there's a new normal. There's a new acceptance of what things look like. And
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even try to do interviews on Zoom for the first month. I thought, no, that's going to be terrible. But there
Yeah.
was no choice. It was either do that or do nothing.
No. No, and it's funny because in a weird way, we're so fortunate that COVID hit at the right time for many of us who have kids. We're trying to go to school, the kids were going to school. If this
How old
had
are your
happened,
kids, Denny?
one's 22, one's 16. But if it'd been 10 years before,
Mhm.
we didn't have the infrastructure for this. There's no way.
That's right. That's right.
So now, what would our society have done? In my film business, my wife's a commercial producer. It's turned itself around very well, because all we do every day is think of how to get out of, we're always problem solving on set. Nothing's ever the same. So you have 50 people where all right, these people have to go and no one's can be next to the, so it's part of what we do for a living. It's not just telling the story, it's organizing.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, we were able to do that.
So we're going to talk about how you got into that. So Niagara Falls, is that right?
Niagara Falls is where my parents are from.
Your parents are from?
Mom and dad were high school sweethearts. 1953, they moved out. And my father, Tommy, was a guitar player. And Tommy Tedesco was a guitar player.
Was he ever? But at that time, what was his level of
professionalism?
Yeah.
I think he had. It's funny you said that. I asked somebody else's computer. Well, that's not mine. I asked my mom a few years ago before she passed. I said, Mom, when there was an incident, basically, there was a dance at Niagara University, and they were invited to the dance.
Mhm.
And my father did not want to go because he got a gig with his jazz trio in Pennsylvania, and he worked in a chemical plant. That's where he worked.
Wow.
So he said, he wanted to go to the gig, and she said, no. She goes, I spent $35 on this dress. We have to go. And so it was like, as so many musicians, he did not want to go.
Right.
But he went, and then at the end of the dance, someone said, hey, the guitar player is leaving, and we told him we have a friend that plays guitar. So my father tried out, and he was good enough to get on the gig, and they took him the next day, went around the country, and that was it. And then got to LA, went to the Hoagie Carmichael show at the Palladium, and then got fired. He got fired because he got let go for the guitar. He got let go, and the singer, because they found someone that could do both.
And cheaper.
Like cheaper, right? Exactly. Let's pull it back. So he was so ashamed. So when he got to Dallas, it was the last day, he drove straight from Dallas all the way to Niagara Falls, didn't stop, and said to my mom, there's work out in Los Angeles, studio work, which he didn't even know that was real. That was not even.
Did your father obviously read music? How was he trained to do that? Where did he train?
He basically trained himself at that point.
Mm-hmm.
He was probably okay of a reader, but enough to get by in the band.
Right.
But when he was so ashamed of being fired being in a small town,
wow.
He left. He didn't want to be there. So I said to my mom, first of all, did Dad work a lot, in music at the time? She goes, no. She goes, there was no gigs in Niagara Falls, New York, maybe a party or a wedding, but there wasn't, so it was never part of his idea of making a living growing, he wasn't thinking of going to New York or LA. That was not part of it. It was by luck. So when he got to LA, I said to her, I said, how long was it before you moved? I said, a year and a half. She goes, no, it was 3 weeks. He was that
What?
embarrassed. She goes, 3 weeks. We packed up. We still owed money on our furniture from our wedding, which we sold, she said, which was illegal, and she, they paid that off and they moved, and they, my older brother and her and my dad. But they got to
Wow.
LA and then started trying to figure out how to get a gig. And
So how did that start for him?
so basically, like so many other musicians, you meet other musicians and you go to clubs, you hang out, you jam, you get start getting a name. He was sub for other people. He was teaching in a music store. There wasn't much guitar to be taught. And he had a friend at a music store. So his friend told him teach accordion. He goes, I don't play accordion. He says, I'll give you a lesson. You can figure it out from there. So he gives him the lesson, and he would make sure, as long as he didn't play the accordion, he could tell the kids, this, and he goes, and then there was one, he said there was.
Did he play piano? Did he take piano lessons? No,
but he probably knew the notes, obviously
Right.
knew the notes, but it was just a gig. He could, as long as he stayed one step ahead of the kid, he was okay. And he said, until there was this one little Chinese kid, he said, the mother comes in and says, I want you to play for her. He goes, no. He says, I do not play for my students. They have to understand. They have to learn from this. He bullshitted his way through that one because he couldn't play. He said she was killer. She was a killer, accordion player.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
but, and then they just, and then, you get, what happened is then he started learning how to read and really learning how to read. And he was so determined to get out of working at Lockheed. He had a job moving boxes and stuff that he basically would, if he wasn't hanging out in the club trying to play, he'd come home and he'd sit there and he'd just play and read music. And he would take the music and flip it upside down so that he could actually not memorize it. So if you're playing a standard, it's the same music. You're not going to read it. You're going to be playing it.
Right.
So he would just flip the music and just make sure he read it through backwards.
Wow.
So he was able to do that. He was really into math. I always think in a gambler that you asked me earlier before we talked about addictions. That was his addiction, was strictly coffee, cigarettes, gambling, and food.
How did I relate to the food. How did the gambling play? Was it ponies? Was it poker? What is this thing?
It could be a raindrop if it's going to hit that. I mean, the guys told me stories making the Wrecking Crew film that was just so awful. I mean, some of it really funny, some of it really sad, but truthful. I mean, they would just gamble. The cards were their thing, and then football, cards and football. But
did he ever get in trouble with any of that?
Talk to my mom, yeah, a lot of times with her.
Mm-hmm.
That was if there was, it's funny because if there was anything in the family, that was because he wasn't a drinker. He didn't like drinking, didn't like drugs at all. And
you were telling me before, why didn't he like that?
Well, he didn't like, he was a control freak. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why he was actually one of the great session players, because he had control of his capabilities, his control of his situation. He didn't like being out of control. So like drinking or smoking, I remember one of the guys, I remember him telling the story of, it might've been Emil Richards, one of the great vibist, percussion players, might have given him something during lunch, like they gave him a toke. I'll give you that, smoking, let me have a hit. And then he sat down and it was a TV date. And it was some really simple thing, on like one of the TV shows, like whatever it was in the 70s. And he said, oh my God, he started screwing up and he screamed across the room, you son of a bitches, this is why. He knew he couldn't play it. He had to get through it, but it was like, that's how it was hard.
Wow. Do you think Denny, were his parents musical? I mean,
no.
Because he wasn't just like a great session player, he was arguably like the greatest session player. So that's, do you think it was in his genes? Do you think it was
it's funny because he used to say, I'm a good guitar player. He says, I'm not a great guitar player. He says, there's great guitar players. He would talk about, am I? Musicians Institute. He goes, some of the players just in the school are amazing guitar players, or the teachers, they're the great guitar players. He didn't find him. He felt he was a great session player, studio player, you know, because he knew what it was about. He had, again, he was an improviser. You know, when it came to someone from a piece of music, he could read it, like I said, upside down. And he did it so well that he had mastered that his craft. And that's what he was called for, you know. And he would say to the students, he said, listen, I've never, you know, you're given a piece of music, you know, John Williams gives it to you, Goldsmith or Conti or Mancini, they give you these pieces of music. It doesn't mean you're going to read it note by note. You still have to bring yourself into it as a player. And he said, and by the way, he says, I've never met a better guitar. I've never met a composer that was a better guitar player than me, meaning none of those guys write for guitar in a sense.
Right.
So they don't know you can't do this like this, but he can't tell them that. He has to still do it. So he knows how to get around his fretboard and the music and still make music.
Well, and how did he was playing live gigs. How did he get into that world
Studios?
of,
Okay, so basically it's recommendations.
know?
So he would, it was like one of them times, probably in the late 50s, because he's here in 53. I was looking at his book at 58. He's starting to work now. So not bad for 5 years.
Fantastic.
So in that time period, what's going on is there's like Lorenzo Almeida was one of the great guitar players at the time, and from Argentina, is a classical guy, you know, flamenco and stuff like that.
Right.
And that was my dad's love. So they would call my father, they would call all the guys in town, they would call Herb Ellis, do you play classical guitar? No. Howard Roberts? No. Barney Kessel? No. And then they get to my father, he said, yeah, I play classical guitar. And all he did was he'd take his classical guitar, but he had a pick. He wasn't like a traditional, and he would be doing a Marlboro commercial or a Western. And it's him and Lorenzo Almeida next, you know, doing stuff like that. So it didn't need to be so, you know, it wasn't like, oh, classical. And that was his trick, is he would use a pick. He knew how to play, you know, that with a pick.
Sounds like he was also willing to say he could do anything. I'm assuming that he just said, yeah, I can do that.
He said, yeah, absolutely. Until, you know, you do that at the beginning, and, you know, you try to get there, and and then he would just get, you know, to that point where, and all the instruments, what he did was, for the guitar players out there, I'm not a guitar player. Let's put that out there now. I don't play an instrument.
We're gonna talk about you not playing an instrument in a minute. Yeah.
But I'll have to pay you for psychology or for my therapy. So no, but he would take every guitar, bouzouki, mandolin, balalaika, any guitar that had anything with strings,
right?
He would tune it like a guitar. So he never went to the mandolin tuning or the bouzouki tuning, because he needed to know where he was in the music. So he knew how to transpose it and get it to where it needed to be. But he goes, it's not the most authentic, you know, but it sounds right, you know. And there was a great story I read where I want to say it was Felix Slatkin was one of the great classical composers. His sister worked in town, was a violinist, and they were doing what do you call it? Love Boat.
Yeah.
So if you're doing a TV show or a movie in the union, you get paid your instrument. Let's say you bring a guitar, you get 100%.
Right.
You go from electric to acoustic, it's a 50%. Anything after that, I think you go down to 25% for every instrument. So if you did a mandolin, and then you get a balalaika, and then you do a bouzouki, you just keep adding to this,
percents.
Adding to it. So one of the, now you got to realize the violinist, they only have one instrument.
Right.
So when you have the two instruments or three, whatever, they call that doubling. So you're doubling on your instruments. So you're going to make a lot more money. So violinists, they don't like that. They're stuck with their violin. Right. And so I think it was her that said, someone said Tommy sarcastically, do you even know what those instruments are called? Because he had a case of these instruments, of
Right.
instruments from all over the world. And he would just pick them up. He goes, yeah, he goes, 100%, 50%, 25%. I mean, he was a character, but he he mastered what did.
He certainly did. So, and do you know at what point, how did, I've seen the documentary, brilliant, heartfelt, genius, loved it, saw it a number of times, gonna go back and watch it again. It's such a love letter to your father. It is such a beautiful, beautiful film, and such an important film because they were so important to music. And so many people didn't know the story. They thought they were really listening to Jan and Dee. They don't know what's going on there.
Yeah.
How did the Wrecking Crew, the elevator pitch come to be?
Basically, all right, so in the 50s, LA, don't forget, LA is a movie town. So their infrastructure for media is movies, TV's coming in.
Right.
There's recordings being done here, but records, you know, the big hits and pop stuff is still coming out of New York, Nashville, Detroit, London, you know, in terms of the pop stuff.
Right.
And you can see that by the charts. If you look at the charts in the late 50s and the early 60s, you say, oh, that was done in New York, that's done in Detroit. And all of a sudden you start seeing LA coming in. Oh, that's the Beach Boys. Oh, there's Wayne Newton. And there, you know, and you start seeing these things popping in.
Mm-hmm.
And what it did was, as soon as the Beach Boys and Spector start kicking in, and they're basically Phil and Brian, they're using the same guys, and they're basically kicking in. You know, they become the guys, the go-to guys. You know, once you start having a reputation, everybody wants you. Right. You know, and that's how it went down. And in those days, you know, they were called 3-hour sessions. And we'll talk about that, why it's different from the immediate family era.
Okay.
Those days you went from 9 to 1 or 9 to 12, maybe a 1 to 4 or a 5 to 8. You could go around the clock doing 3-hour sessions. That's what the union booked it for. So in those 3 hours, all you were allowed to do was 3 or 4 songs. They didn't want you to jam a whole album out in 3 hours. You know, it was like, you know, it was factory work.
And so you might be doing Jan and Dean here, and then you're doing Sonny and Cher here or something like.
Totally. I mean, it's funny because I'll show you, well, I don't have it in front of me, but you know, hold that thought one second.
Yeah, absolutely. Show and tell. We love show and tell, Denny. We love show and tell. And I have weird hair and weird lipstick, and well, I'm just gonna focus on how weird I look now that I'm not looking at you. Come back quick.
I'm back.
Okay.
It's like the books. Basically, you know, you're seeing his workbooks. This is 67.
Wow.
So, you know, so you're getting like, you know, like this day he's at Western, then he's at MGM, then he's got hold for David Gates. It's so funny seeing these things because I can translate.
Wow.
And you know, there's like 3 or 4 sessions in these days. Earl Palmer, United and stuff like that. So they would go to different sessions, different contractors or different producers. And that's how, you know, and they didn't spend much time. Labels didn't believe at the early days that rock and roll was real. Like any music coming through, it's a fad. It's not going to be around. And sure enough, once they started making money and they start putting more money into it, right. You know, then they realize, okay, well, all right, we're getting our money back. But that's why groups in the early days in the 60s weren't allowed to use their instruments many times. You know, like the Association, when Bones Howe, or a lot of these groups, you know, a lot of groups didn't play on the albums.
Right.
They had the studio guys come in and ghost form because they only had 3 hours.
And they needed the pros to come in, get it done, and
get it done. Then the group learns the stuff, goes on the road and kills it. You know what I mean? But in those early days, you had to get an album out. You had to get it on the record, on the radio. Things were moving so fast. So it wasn't like a big plan of, you know, how we're going to get this out there, you know, and they just did it.
And so how did the core of the Wrecking Crew come to Like Carole, like how did
Basically, all these people, they're intertwining. They're not like a band. They're
right,
still like, dad might go to work with Earl Palmer at 10 o'clock on one day, but Hal Blaine's on the next date, or Carole or Ray Pullman. But it's still a group of, I say, within 20 musicians
I was gonna
really
say
killing.
how many people are in that?
There are like 20, 25 musicians. And it's really not Hal Blaine made the thing up. He made the name up in a sense.
How
And
so?
he used to tell the story about how when they were doing the rock and roll stuff in the early 60s,
Right,
the older guys, and don't forget, here's the other reason why these guys are capturing all that stuff. The older guys don't want to do this music. Some of it is non-union, so they're not going to risk getting busted, or they're not going to risk a real movie date for a $25 gig for a song.
right, right.
These guys in the late 50s, they'll take a chance, and hey, Phil Spector's or someone who's got something going. Yeah, it was 1 for 25, 2 for 30, or whatever it was. And you would do that just to get in, but then it became, okay, it's legit. Now they've taken the seats over. So the older guys now want in, they can't get in because now they want to play rock and roll. And, my father, it's somewhat is it rock and roll, it's pop rock and roll, whatever it was at the time.
Right.
But
Right.
it wasn't my dad's favorite music.
What was it? What was his favorite music?
Jazz would have been it, or not classical, but so much Spanish. He loved music. I mean, it wasn't that he didn't like rock and roll.
Mhm.
The stuff he's playing is not that much fun for him. Do you know what I mean? He's playing 3 chords. When he gets to play and they give him the classical guitar and say go nuts on that song, it could have been Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves, or whatever, or Up and Away with Fifth Dimension. He's able to go loose, and then he's creating. He loves it. But he didn't have what the immediate family has in the early 70s. All the next session players of the singer-songwriter, all those guys that come in New York and LA, and all those other groups of session players in the 70s, they're taking their time and enjoying making the music. I'm not saying my dad didn't enjoy work. He loved work, but it wasn't something that you would spend 2 weeks on one album. That's crazy talk.
But did he ever like go out and play in the clubs or do any of that stuff?
It's funny because he did later. So I'm born in 61, and I never saw my father play guitar at home until 75, 76.
No kidding.
Because he never brought a guitar home to practice. He didn't need to.
He was working every day.
He did 3, 4, he could do 12, 14 hours a day.
Jesus.
Everybody giving him another piece of music all day long. And he said, he didn't listen to the radio. He came home, he watched TV, or he listened, ball games or whatever, but music was not it. So when he started doing seminars and teaching around the country, like doing like for Gibson or Fender or whatever he was represented by, and then GIT, which was the Guitar Institute, the students were the ones that really pushed him and said, why don't you play for yourself? And you realize he missed that. He didn't, and that's when he did his, started playing live again and came out with some jazz albums in the 70s. But he missed that. And, from that point on, never put that guitar down. Even at home, even after he had a stroke, he still had the guitar in his hand. The left hand was fine. It was the right hand that made it, basically brought him to retirement. But always kept it, even when it's slow, even when it was slow in the later days in the 80s before the stroke, he constantly had it in his hand. It was something I, never saw.
Wow. And so the business must have changed for him, because as the 50s into the 60s, by the 70s, bands are playing their own music, right?
Right. Well, he goes back to the fortunate thing. What he had was he could read the shit out of something, so that gave him another career, because now he's gone from, when he moves here in the early 50s, he's doing, my voice just cracked. I was 13 again. My voice cracked.
Good. It's good to be young, forever young.
Yes. Thank you. Tell that to my doctor. So he's doing the clubs. Now he's doing records in the 50s and the 60s. And he's doing some TV and stuff in some movies in the 60s and 70s. But now it's strictly records are going. He's out of the records. He's going straight into TV and film. And from that point on, he's, hugely in demand, in that world, because he could do the reed, he could play his acoustic, the classical, he could do all the instruments.
Right.
If you want to, and I asked him, what is the difference between him and, let's say, a specialist? He goes, listen, you got a door behind the studio door, you don't know what's there. He says, you go in there, it says, mandolin. Well, if you want BB King, he's not going to play the mandolin, but he can play the blues, kill the blues, and maybe, but not the man. It's the same thing with Eric Clapton. You can't do classical, whatever it is, you bring those people into that, but a studio player is able to get close. He goes, I am not the best classical guitar player. I'm not the best rock guitar. I will pretend to get as close as possible. That's all. He says, I play, if the person's smiling, I'm doing their job. I'm doing the right job. So he says, if I play for smiles, if they're not smiling, I got to keep playing, because I got to figure out what he wants or she wants. And it was, it was a real work ethic, and that kept him going. In the later days, the last days in a career, now you're getting, it's funny because it's Leland can remember this when we talked about the answering service. That was their lifeline. You had like 3 or 4 answering services. There was one like called Your Girl or Hotline, and there was Arlen's, and you would call an answering service and they would say, Tommy's calling in, said, okay, so-and-so called and said, are you available tonight at 6? Yeah. Okay. So he's doing that at breaks during the other studios. So he's picking up work all day long or whatever. My mom's taking those calls. He would go from Hollywood, come home. Don't forget, folks out there that are under 30, 40, there were no cell phones.
Right.
So he would come from Hollywood. By the time he walked in, the first thing he would say, it was a habit all his life, any calls. And that meant, did the service call? Or is there any message? It was about work. It wasn't, about friends. We had 3 rotary phones, like four lines in the house for the kids. I had a line, my sister and I can't remember, but there were 4 lines. There was never going to be a busy signal in that house, because if you get a busy signal, that call goes somewhere else. That call goes, that guy's calling so-and-so and said, oh, guess what? Hey, I got a movie next week. What are you doing next week? Then I got a movie. It was about work.
Right.
And if I learned anything from my father, it was about work. I can't it's about, being smart about it. So again, the answering service was our key to that.
Okay, so let's talk about the Denny Tedesco work ethic. So why no instrument? You come from this man who is like the greatest guitar.
I doing so many interviews. I remember one person said on a radio interview, yeah, the instrument has to find you. I said, well, that's good, because I could blame the instrument. And then it was like something about, it's a God-given talent. I thought, great, now I could blame God.
Did you have no interest in music? Did you try? Did you not?
I did. I love listening to music. I love the idea of playing music. But there's this thing you got to do, is called practice. And I heard that's one of the key things. And I said, I just can't get, and I didn't realize until years later, when my child was diagnosed with ADHD, I realized doing those things, that's me. And I always wondered if that's why I never picked up, I can't spend more than 10, 15 minutes.
That's so interesting, because a friend of mine found out he has ADHD when his kid, because his kid got diagnosed.
Really?
That's how he found out. Yes.
Was he a musician?
Yes.
See, it works for some people. Their focus goes there and they don't leave it. Mine was, I'm all over that place. So I just never did. So what was your focus when you were a kid? What was your passion when you were a kid? Fun.
Fun is good.
girls football, I just love having, I grew up in LA, like I said, 70s were my decade. So I had fun.
Were you a good student, decent student? How was that?
Okay. It's funny because now I have a 16-year-old in 11th grade. And that was about the time I kicked in because I started understanding what I needed to do. I wanted to go Loyola Marymount and I needed to bring up the grades. That's what they told
What
me.
did you want to study at Loyola? Why
Film.
Loyola?
Film.
And how did that passion happen?
I don't know. I don't. It's funny because I did a commercial when I was acting in, high school in the plays and stuff. And someone said, I went in for an audition for a Pizza Hut commercial, which I was typecast. And I felt, ashamed. No, but I played Pizza Hut and I did more mushrooms and more pepperoni were my lines. Made money and went, oh, I could do this. Not knowing there was more to it. And no, so then I went to Loyola and I wanted to write. But then guess what? If you're gonna be a writer, you have to write all the time. You have to play an instrument, you got to play all the time. So now on my resume at this point out of college, I have a lot of things feeling like not finished. So I'm at the time I come out of college, I've been doing art department, then I'm going to lighting and grip and do IMAX films for a while.
Yes, and you did the Oscars with Billy Crystal, which is kind of
right.
thrilling.
That was one of my first producing jobs. But what it was all these unfinished things. And then I got involved with the Wrecking Crew thing, the doc. And Dad was passing away in '95 or no.
Wait, you're going too fast.
Sorry, all over
all
the
this
place
stuff.
there. Yeah.
No, that all over the place is good. ADHD, I'm right with you.
Yeah.
Just stop for a second on that Billy Crystal thing. So Robert Wall's a good friend of mine. Robert wrote that monologue for Billy, by the way.
That?
Yeah.
Wow.
But okay, so you did this, you've had successes as a grip.
Right, exactly. I went from college, I'd done a film during college called Eating Raoul, which was
fabulous film.
Yeah, it was, for anybody that doesn't know it, it's a very dark comedy about these two swingers in Hollywood that start killing swingers. They weren't even swingers, they're two straight people that start killing swingers so that they could have a restaurant, and in the end they eat Raoul. It's very dark.
Very
sounds
dark.
awful.
No, it was great. Yeah.
I didn't know what it was, I was on a film and this art director said, would you be interested in this film as a decorator? And I didn't know what a decorator did, but I said, okay. And I went for an interview and lied and got the job. And it was the perfect job to lie on because it was family. It was only a 3-person art department and everybody did anything.
It sounds like you have that Tedesco ability to, yes, I can do that. And just.
Yes. But then I've gotten better at not saying, yes, I can do that. I've learned my lesson. Yeah.
Did it ever backfire on you?
Not really. I just don't, sometimes, no, not really.
Yeah.
Except maybe they haven't called. I don't know. Maybe it did.
No, I don't think so. Okay. So how did the Wrecking Crew so how did you go from working on things to being a filmmaker?
So then what I did was I started this series, actually working on a series called Pulp Comics, which was a Comedy Central series. And I was producing with all these comedians, and we would do the films about the stand-up, and it was great. So short films. And that's where I get to meet a lot of comics and stuff. And that's how I got into the Billy Crystal thing. And then from that point, 2001 come around, we got 9/11 and all that. And then at some point, no, Dad's already passed. That's right, Dad passed by then. Dad passed and he was diagnosed with cancer in '96. And I wanted to I always wanted to tell the story about my father and his friends, supposedly the Wrecking Crew.
I assume they didn't call themselves that, did they?
No, so I never finished that story. Oh my God.
That's all right.
The Wrecking Crew, basically when Hal used to say, these guys are going to wreck the business. Or not, Hal didn't say that. Older guys said that about Hal, Carole, Dad, all the younger guys. And they were going to wreck the business playing this rock and roll stuff. What they meant was the business is going to shit because this music's shit and they're doing it for nothing and da 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 da. Well, so the old guys were poo-pooing on the younger guys.
Right.
So Hal's told that story when he was writing his book, and someone said, that's a great title for a book. Let's call it The Wrecking Crew. But that's how that came about.
Uh-huh.
So Dad got cancer, lung cancer, and it was, they said a year, it was terminal. So I wanted to tell that story. I thought, if I don't do it, it's never going to happen. So I thought I better jump into it. And I quickly jumped into that round table with Carole Kay, the bass player, Plaz Johnson, and Dad and Hal. Interviewed Don Randy, and I interviewed Cher after Dad passed. I had a nice 14-minute piece, but no one would help me. They said, it's never going to make its money. You'll never get people to give you money because, it's going to make this much and it's going to cost this much. So I just had to keep going. And after 12 years, my wife Susie was like, we just spent so much money on the most expensive home movie ever.
Okay, so wait, so let's talk about that. How did you were doing your own financing, obviously, at that point.
Yeah.
I've had filmmakers on that made movies with iPhones and credit cards.
Well, right. At the time, we were shooting 16mm film. So we're shooting film at the time.
Right. And how are you getting the money? How you coming up with the dough?
Basically working, refinancing, begging, my crew's helping me for free. All my friends were helping me, but you still needed to buy the film. You still needed to get cameras. You still, so the credit card, okay, let's, spend about $5,000. All of a sudden you're going up and you refi on the house. All of a sudden you're doing that. Uh-oh, now you're really in trouble. And after 12 years, all that debt, but nothing to show for it. So we had to make the film. Got help from Mom, and we basically cut it. Got Claire Scanlon, who was a fabulous director now, who was editing at the time, and she worked on The Office. And we basically cut the film, got it into festivals. Again, no one helps. We got 110 songs in there that have to be licensed.
Wow.
So we're in festivals, but no one's gonna, you still have to pay if you're gonna release it. So
wait, you can send it to a festival without
you pay a festival right, which is like, it's $100.
Oh,
it's still a lot of money.
Yeah, when you add them all up, sure.
200 something, times. So I did that, and then 2008 hit. That's when it came out in festivals. And economy went to shit, and no one wanted to talk to me. No one wanted to talk about documentaries. And then the idea of music doc was even a bigger kiss of death.
Oh,
so
God.
We kept going. And then 2010, I said, I can't give up, because the reviews and the award, I had awards and reviews and sold out crowds. I wasn't worried about the film. And I'm not saying this because it's my film. I just knew as a product, it was succeeding. And if I quit, it's over. All I got is a trophy, but I got a lot of debt. So now I have to roll the dice back to Dad, just gambling. I was gambling, basically, keep going. But I came up with ideas of how to raise money. And one of them was, and I tried to get the music industry to help us. They, like the Fenders and the Zildjian or Ludwig's, and everybody would give me some product, but no one would give me any money. And I was trying to say on the DVD, I said, I was trying to find sponsorships. Then someone said, I'll give you $1,000 to dedicate a song. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, how we put a brick in the building? He goes, at hospitals with names, I'll dedicate Up, Up and Away, because that got me into the radio business, that song. And I said,
how are you going to do the dedication?
On the website, on the DVD,
on the credits,
on the end of the credits. I just said dedicated by, so-and-so. Now on the actual DVD, people will write out their whole, dedication of their loved ones.
Wow.
And so I came up with these ideas, and also money starts flowing in. So when the money starts coming in, I pay off a publisher, I pay off a label, I pay off, and I keep
Wait, so
going,
you're
keep
literally
going.
making money to finish the film by people dedicating songs within the film to loved ones?
Not just now, not just then, I just do other things. I go from zero to $1 to $99. If you donate, you're a groupie. If you go $100 to $300, you're a roadie. And I kept coming up levels. And so then I would go basically around the country. People would invite me, would you show the film? And I said, okay, if I show it, I have to come out. I have to, and I would find sponsors. I would find like-minded sponsors, people that were, retirement lawyers. I would put their name up on the screen with a montage of stills and music before the film started.
Wow.
I would give them 10 tickets. They'd give me a couple $100. So that started paying for my travel. Any extra money, it goes right back to the paying off that. I learned about, never paid for a hotel room, never paid for
How did you
meals
never pay for a hotel room?
I gave them tickets. I need 3 days. I need, or 2 days, whatever it was. I need 2 days for a room. Here's 10 tickets. I don't care. I want them to give those tickets away.
Right.
But their name is up on my website forever. Name is, it's there forever.
Did you study marketing at all? Was this all instinctual?
No, it was all going along as I went along. And it's funny because at that point, I was having so much fun. I'm still trying to sell a film, but I'm nailing, like, oh my God, my favorite was certain songs, yes, Be My Baby, or, all those songs go instantly, people, right? And then there's songs like Everybody Loves a Clown. Who's gonna dedicate that one? And I'm thinking, clown school. So I call a clown school, the LA Clown School, and I give the guy my pitch, and he goes, I'm in. So he gives me the money. And I loved it because it was so much fun, because it's just fun to do that. I love marketing.
Wow.
In a sense, I do market, I produce stuff, but I always tell everybody, if I tell my kids or any kids, you're always marketing. You're marketing yourself. You're always trying to sell yourself. Whatever we're doing, we're selling. And I learned a lot from that. I came up with food. Give me $100 gift certificate. Their name's up. They get 10 tickets, 5 tickets. Didn't matter. It was saving us money and putting it back into the screen, not on the screen, to get the money paid off. And then the last thing we did was Kickstarter, and that was to pay off the musicians union, because they had basically, all those musicians are contracts, and I wanted to make sure that they get paid as a reuse. So we had to come up with 200,000 for the reuse, and that's what we did. And we did a Kickstarter, and we pulled it off.
Those are a lot of work, aren't they? Doing those Kickstarter campaigns.
I just did it. It's funny. I just did it. That's why I'm wearing this. Hanging with Dr. Z.
Tell us about Hanging with Dr. Z.
Well, Hanging with Dr. Z is my latest project. Dana Gould is one of the great comedians I worked with many years ago. And he, with Rob Cohen and Peter Harrison, Rob's a director and Peter's a EP. Dana is Dr. Zaius freak from Planet of the Apes. So he gets into the whole makeup and everything. And we basically he does during COVID, this is a way to keep going, interview other comedians as if it was like the Merv Griffin show meets Fernwood Tonight.
Fernwood Tonight's my favorite show of all time. So yes.
Well, that's another thing we'll talk about. So basically we interviewed like Patton Oswalt, Bobcat, Goldthwait, and just Hank Azaria, and so many. So the second time we did a Kickstarter, and I came up with the idea of Scrubs, and it's like so there because it's doctor, and that's the only time I could ever put Dr. Tedesco.
Yeah,
I'm very proud of it.
Somebody asked about Dr. Tedesco. Whoa.
Yes, I like to call it. I'm considering myself a first responder.
Tony said, what's behind Dr. Tedesco in the Scrubs? Well, you just answered that question. There you go, Tony. So Tony's the one who made that composite of all your photos, which
that's funny. Thanks, Tony. Thanks for noticing, by the way.
That's right. Thanks. So
Sorry,
No,
killed you on that.
no, don't be sorry. I love the Scrubs, by the way. They're pretty fabulous. So, okay, so that's not your late, well, it is your latest project, but
Really.
it's,
So the
you've got a,
immediate family is the one that's, yes, that's the one.
all right, wait, before we get
that,
off this,
yeah.
before we get off the Wrecking Crew.
Yeah.
Did you end up, I assume you ended up getting all your money back, having success with it?
I did
and-
go, well, I did do yes, well, yes and no.
Okay,
We did, unfortunately, which is a good thing and a bad thing. We did go bankrupt.
oh,
You know, I didn't realize, I had good credit. You know why? Because all those people that helped me, like Wells Fargo and Citibank and American, they're good people. They all helped me. I kept paying them. But what I'm saying is I didn't realize how bad I was until, realized. So the banks, I tried to get, I just tried to keep going and paying them for years, kept paying them. And really my accountant said, you can't do that. You'll never survive. So that was the way to do it. And I came out of bankruptcy. So I'm very proud
Denny,
of that.
while you tell this story, I gotta go get a battery, so I'm putting you in the spotlight, go.
What am I talking to? Anybody?
No, I'm still listening to you. I can hear
Oh,
you.
I got you. You're just charging your battery. Yeah, so that was basically, yes, yes, we did okay with it in the end. We ended up getting our money back, or some of our money back. But, in the sense that it succeeded beyond everybody's beliefs or, thoughts or, I think the greatest compliment I got was when one of the publicists at Magnolia said, I said, how's it going? When they were trying to do the first press, the first, weeks out. And she goes, in 30 years, I've never had it so easy. And she goes,
Wow.
and she says, because, everybody's been waiting for this. And in a sense, we laid the groundwork for so long. Musicians taught me about, if anything, the musicians taught me about, like, hey, you're gonna sell merch. You're gonna do this, do a 20 instead of 15. So it's one bill, da 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 da. Get emails. That's the other thing I learned. So every time I would give away a gift or something, a CD or a hat, I'd say, give me your email address. We'll have a raffle at the end. And that's what we do. So when we did do the Kickstarter, I had 20,000 emails, at least to help us, Facebook,
Wow.
we kept trivia and kept it going.
Wow.
And that worked.
So a lot of personal sacrifice.
Yeah, but it goes back to what we were talking about, how watching my father and all these musicians, all the musicians that have ever made it, every one of them that no one, as my father said, you don't get lucky in music. You get lucky in golf. You have to practice. Do you know what I mean? You have to master your instrument. You have to work at these things. And if you have talent, that's great. But you really have to, and so I never got to that point of mastering anything. So in a sense, over those 10 years of trying to get the film out there, it ended up being 19, but I never gave up and I kept going. Should I have given up? Some people would have said yes. And I'm sure my family and friends, we all have people, writing that novel or that script or how's it going? It's like that Brian, from Family Guy. How's the novel going? There you go. Don't jump. But what I mean? It's like some people don't believe you. They just think are we just bullshitting ourselves? No, I knew where I was heading. No one else saw where I was heading.
Right.
And I don't blame anybody. I mean,
I assume you have no regrets, Denny.
no. Well, yeah, there's regrets, but would I have done things differently? A couple things. I think I was too scared to move forward. I should, where it was like.
How so?
Like Brian Wilson, or trying to get certain interviews. Instead of me trying to push.
Yeah.
I was kind of like trying to beat around the bush, or trying to never really getting there. And I wasn't ready. And I should have just gone for it. Because if they say no, so what? You ask them again later. You know what I mean? I never thought about that. That's the only thing. I would just, I never gave up though. So
no kidding. And you turned out quite a product. Okay, so were you as aware of the section as you were, did you know about the I mean, you had to have known about the
Well, I
section.
knew about the guys. I knew their
Right.
names for years.
Right.
You know, and so
Right.
it's funny because when like I said, when I'm growing up in the 70s, my
Right.
older brother actually was a publisher and he worked at Warner Brothers and MCA and ABC for a while in the publishing. So he used to bring albums home all the time. So all of those albums, like the Randy Newman albums and the Crosby, Stills, Nash and all those albums and James Taylor, we had all those albums. He's 10 years older than me. So I'm reading those credits. You know, I'm seeing these names, you know, not knowing, you know, that one day I would actually meet them. But I knew them as legends, you know. And it's so funny. The funny thing was when, so the guys, the producers, Greg, Jack, and Jonathan came to me and said, would you be interested in doing this film on the section? And I said, well, let me, it was a quick thought. I said, let's talk about it. And it was basically, they have a band called Immediate Family, which we know. And it's Waddy Wachtel and Leland Sklar, Russ Kunkle, Danny Kortchmar, and Steve Postel, who's the kid at 64. Or I think, you know,
I've known Steve Postel for 35 years. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a baby.
Yeah.
So it's so funny. It's like, I think he unfortunately gets the brunt of everything on that band. I think but so I thought, well, you know, this kind of makes sense because at the end of the Wrecking Crew documentary, Lou Adler says, hey, times changed. You know, he goes, when I did Tapestry, he goes, Carole King brought in James Taylor and Danny Kortchmar. So I was like, oh my God, all right, now it does make sense. It's the jumping off point.
Right.
Because there's a jumping, we could have done, every one of these session players in this town could have a doc on them. I mean, you got the Baccaros, you got, you know, Abe Laboriel and his son, and there's so many people.
Right.
So, but this, I could grasp this because, all right, they're family. And the difference between these guys and my dad and his friends, those guys never left town. You didn't leave town because if you left town in the 60s, it means you had to leave town because you needed the work, baby, or they were paying you a lot of money.
Right.
Glenn Campbell, when he took over for Brian Wilson for the Beach Boys in the mid 60s, whatever it was, he must have been making a lot of money to do that.
Right.
So you didn't do that. And the other thing is, the sessions were 3 hours when my dad worked. Now sessions they're spending.
All right,
more
you were
time.
going to explain this. Yeah.
So
wait, so
Earl
now
Palmer,
the sessions are what?
Well, a great example is Earl Palmer said it. He goes, you know, the great drummer. He said in the 70s, they weren't record dates anymore. They were record projects, which meant you took days or weeks on it. So you would constantly come back and do these songs over and over again.
Right.
And, you know, and then I interviewed Peter Asher and I said something about Peter. I said, about these guys, I said, you know, they're legends, you know, in my head, they're all legends. He goes, but they weren't legends at the time. They were just people we knew. And I realized, I mean, look at Russ Kunkle. His first 3 albums were Blue, Sweet Baby James, and Tapestry.
Unbelievable.
I mean, you could quit there and be a historic figure in music.
Unbelievable. Absolutely.
So that's the difference. Times change, music's changing.
Russ will be with us in 2 weeks, by the way, everybody.
Oh, he's so great. You know, and it's funny, these guys have such a great reputation. That's the other thing. I love musicians. It's a love-hate relationship as well. And I say that proudly.
How so? What do you hate?
Oh, come on. They can be the biggest pain in the asses in the world. I grew up with one. I loved him, but you know, no, I mean, I just have such respect for them because, and I'm not talking about just professionals, any musician, anybody out there playing a guitar right now, you know, I have respect for you. I didn't get there. Do you know what I mean?
And do none of your siblings play either?
No, my younger brother is a sound engineer, and he's like the engineer and mixer for a Family Guy and American Dad
Wow.
and Animaniacs. So he does all the orchestras and all that. But
Wow.
he played sax, and I played sax briefly in high school. I got out of typing class and said to the priest, I said, I want to learn an instrument. Can I be in the band? And it was like, after having your knuckles beat up because you looked at the keys, I said, I don't want to do this anymore. So I joined the band, but in the end, I became the banner carrier. I didn't even get to play with sax section. So another check off my list.
Okay, so they came to you, they said, would you be interested in making
Right.
this
So
film?
I said, and I like the idea of the fact that now we have a spin on it. These guys have been friends for over 50 years.
Did you know any of them?
No, I knew Leland, you know, because Leland is probably the sweetest and most supportive person I know in life. Honestly, God, when we were doing things with the Wrecking Crew, he would just show up and give his support. And I remember he was there for the Hands and Cement at the Guitar Center, all these people, and Leland's there. I remember finding him standing in line like 50 people back at a book sign or a DVD signing at Amoeba. I'm like, oh, Lee, come here, please get out of line. You know, he's that guy.
Well, we met, and then he came to my living room just to watch other people play. He was scheduled to play when everything ended. Right. Yeah. But anyway, yes, he's wonderful.
And, you know, and their reputations, these guys, when you start talking to these artists, oh my God, that's why, you know, hey, it's not because Denny Tedesco was going to do the interview with Carole King. She could give, you know, care less, or Linda Ronstadt, whatever. But when it was about, hey, they want to do an interview about these guys, instant.
Wow.
Instant, so fast.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those interviews, because, oh my God, you interviewed James Taylor, Carole King, Linda Ronstadt. What was that like for you as a filmmaker?
Well, the hardest, because Carole King's my first interview. And when Greg and Jack, and they said, hey, we got, Danny said Carole's interested, but she's in town in 3 weeks. I'm like, oh my God, we don't even have a premise of this film yet. I really didn't. I mean, I had a spin on it, but you know, it takes a while. But so I started doing my, you know, reading my books and this and that, and and I was really, you know, and I did it. And then we went to, I think the next one was James, and then Linda. And when Linda's doc just came out, and she was so sweet. I mean, God, she was just, and she reminded me of my mom in a lot of ways, because she had Parkinson's. And so I could see the shuffle, and, you know, I see that in family, and but so sweet. And James, so sweet. And Jackson, you know, they couldn't say enough about these guys.
Well, of course they have to love them. They're the backbone of all their
music. I mean, again, it's the musicians respect each other. You know, good musicians always respect each other. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, you might not like someone personally, but you know, my greatest compliment I could hear my father say, he'd be listening to the radio or come home and say, man, I just heard this so-and-so. What? He's a son of a bitch. He's a motherfucker. You know, but it was the greatest, excuse my language. I didn't realize I can't swear on this.
Oh, you can totally swear on fuck. Yes, you can swear.
Okay, good. But it was the greatest compliment. He's a bitch. That means, oh my God, he's playing, or she's playing, you know, and that used to get him excited. I mean, you know,
speaking of she's a bitch, was there, I mean, Carole was a very unusual.
Very.
Okay, so
first of all, hold on, everybody. Vicki just made the segue. I did not make that segue. So I'm just saying. I'm as
AGG as you are. So
let's just go back, rewind.
All right, Carole K, unbelievable that this woman is a part of this.
Huge.
So how did the guys in the Wrecking Crew accept Carole?
They accepted her as a guitar player, as a musician. Now, they treated her like shit, like everybody did. Do you know what I mean? I know she said things like, oh my God, my father said that to you. I don't question it. They get in arguments, they're calling each other bad names,
Right.
but they're calling each other bad names one-on-one. You know what I mean? It's not one-on-one. You know what I'm saying? It's, you could call someone something or call each other out. But their respect for each other as musicians first. And your friend, you deal with your other bullshit, whatever. But they went to work and they dealt with their stuff. Carole was a fabulous guitar player. But she was, there was a lot of guitar players. In the set, you had Bill Pittman, you had Dad, you had Glenn Campbell, you had Billy Strange, you had Howard Roberts, you had Barney Kessel. Right there, you got 6, 7,
Right.
you know what I mean? And then you got Carole. So Carole was lucky enough to accidentally get on bass. And she took over because Ray Pullman, the great bass player at the time, Fender bass player, he started doing Shindig. So he goes to Shindig. So now there's a bunch of openings open. So she just takes over and can play the hell out of the bass. And that's what she does. So her, as a relationship, I'm sure they tortured her. She tortured them back. It's, I've seen it, I see what they do to each other. But, there's no doubt they have respect for her. This is the one thing I always say this, because Glenn Campbell said something. He said, don't forget, that's in the early days, they're doing the Spectre dates and all these other dates. It's mono. There's only one track. There's no multi-tracking.
Right.
So you get everybody coming into the board. Nobody better make a mistake, because we only have 3 hours. We have to get 4 songs done. You make a mistake, we don't take the computer and punch in at bar 32.
Right.
You either cut tape, which they don't want to do the cutting tape. So they go back, let's do it again. And so anybody in that room, he said, was a Michael Jordan. He says, but everybody was a Michael Jordan. So I give all of them a lot of credit for in regards to Carole. Carole's not there because she's a woman or someone's girlfriend. It's far from it. She's there as a musician. Do you know what I mean? And that's the ultimate respect, because that's why she's there. She wasn't a hire or a friend.
Right.
She's a bass player. She's, if your bass and your drums are gone or not, they're not connecting, you're dead. So they're locking, those two are locking in, and everybody's following suit. So I give Carole all the credit in the world for that.
Absolutely.
yeah,
She's a pioneer. Absolutely a pioneer.
Yeah.
Phil Sloan was a friend of mine and did My Living Room, one of his last things, and a lot of people don't realize that his voice is the voice we're hearing when we think we're hearing other people.
Yeah. That was just part of the deal. I mean, it was a product, people always think it was a product. You go to work, you're still making a product. That was my father's philosophy. I go to work, I play for smiles, as I said. Now, if he said, I might not think it's the right thing to play, but you know what? I'm not paying the check. That person is writing me a check. He wants me to play that. I'll play like that. And so whether it's dumbed down or it's not the best, you still have to deliver. And Danny Kortchmar and I talked about this in a lot of ways. There's a difference between Danny and my dad.
How so?
Danny couldn't do that, I don't think, in terms of, I don't want to say sell out. They all have. I don't want to say selling out doesn't mean to say you do those gigs, you're 9 to 5, not the 9 to 5s, you're 9 to 12, da 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 da. My dad didn't give a shit. I'm sure he didn't.
His ego wasn't in that mix.
No, and probably because he did, yes, he cared about the music. He cared about making the job right. Now he goes, there's the music and there's the music business. He goes, sometimes they connect, but you always have two when he's doing that. And so you want to make music and you want to do it exactly, that's your choice of your album or whatever you want to do.
Right.
I just think, and that's the same thing for me. I still have to answer to people when I'm producing for jobs or directing. They don't like it, I got to change it.
Right.
So
Denny, what's the trajectory for, because we're still kind of in a,
frozen.
I'm frozen. Am I
Still there?
frozen? Yeah, I'm still here. I see you.
Uh-oh.
You're in real
There?
time. There
There
you
you
are. What's the trajectory for the immediate family film? Because we're kind of still in a
So
pandemic.
right now, so basically now we're in the post, we're doing our second run, the third run through cut wise.
Mhm.
It's getting better every time. I'm hoping we'll be done cutting by the end of the year. And then we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm excited about this. It's, it's first time through, very nerve-wracking seeing a cut.
Yeah.
Never gonna happen, never gonna work. And then you start peeling away and start getting there. You go, oh, I like this. I'm starting to like a film. Always hate at the beginning. And then it's like, then you start getting there and you go, I like it. And then it goes away again and go back again. I'm sure that's what musicians must feel like sometimes when they put an album out. I don't know. I just think it's the right time. Again, music docs are, thank God, are living. And
are you, is the pandemic messing with things still?
no, not
so
really.
much. Mhm.
Not so much now. I mean, yeah, there was things, like I said, yeah, I would have loved to have gotten, Neil Young in person.
Right.
But you know what? It's Neil Young. And like I said, it's the message. The
But I
biggest.
mean, as far as putting it out and marketing it
No,
and getting.
no. Distributors are still, we still have to get the sales team involved, and distributors are coming in. So it's really
Are you
about
going to
that
do the festivals again?
maybe, I guess so. I hope so. I love that. Honestly, I really do love festivals. I love talking to people, and that's the
You're
thing is
good
what
at
I
it.
did is when I went to festivals, I would have fun. I was
Great.
like the only guy that I'd be giving tickets at the festival. Here, come on. Here, I don't care. I just want to have fun with people. And I
It
met a lot of
shows.
wonderful people over all those years, and some became really good friends,
It's
still.
wonderful.
And all over the world. This music is, this music and the immediate family music, it's all over the world.
Indeed.
So, and the humor's there.
Is there some, and so you do both, you do comedy and music. Is there more Dr. Z?
Yeah, there is more Dr. Z. Hanging with DrZ.com. We just did the second season. We're just cutting it now. Again, we did Penn, Gillette, and we did Weird Al Yankovic. It's just wacky. You know what you're talking about? Fernwood Tonight.
Right.
My dad was happy in the Happy Kind band.
Oh, stop. Oh God, Disco Duck.
He was Tommy Marinucci. He was the guitar player.
Oh my God. Norman Lear. When I met Norman, I immediately said, Mary Hartman, Fernwood Tonight. Everyone says All in the Family. No, that was, and Fred Willard was a friend of mine, and Jerry Hubbard was like the most brilliant character like ever. And
oh my God. So when I was in high school, I would go see those, I would see tapings.
Oh my God.
And then what they would do is at the beginning, at the beginning of the show, there's just like 3 rows of old people. Right. And then what they would do is basically get a bus, like one of those bus tours, free show, blah, 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 bring them in, drop the curtain, film the opening, and then the curtain would go up and it'd be whoever else was in the audience.
Right.
So when my father got the call to do that job, they said, why don't you come in for an audition? He goes, no, I'm not going to do an audition. Now, anybody that doesn't know who my father looks like, my father was 250 pounds at the time. He was probably, 250 pounds. And, he goes, I'm not going in. He goes, every time you want an audition, you look for a young 24-year-old kid with curly hair. He's basically talking about Lee Rittenhour at the time. He goes, I'm not going in. And they said, no, 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 we're looking for a guy that looks like he's a truck driver from Cleveland. He goes, I'll be right down. So he went right into the audition because that's what he looked like.
Wow.
And so now gets the gig. It's Frank Duvall, who's one of the greatest composers of the time.
Oh my
all
God.
time. Funniest guy. You had
so funny.
Frank Morocco, one of the greatest accordion players. And you had the other guys in the band, the four quartet, and Martin plays guitar. So now my father's in heaven. And now, and the thing was, in the first day, the fire marshal comes to him because my father, remember we talked about addictions, his addiction was cigarettes. And he would not take a job if he couldn't smoke. And they said, you can't smoke on stage. And, because it's a working set, he goes, I'll get through this.
In those days, didn't like Johnny Carson smoke on Johnny Carson?
Probably,
used to
right. But what they did was Norman said, you know what? It's a prop. So that's probably that's how they got around it.
Right.
So now you've watched, if you look at any of those old episodes, you'll see Dad smoking a cigarette and just blazing on his guitar. And they had fun and they get to act, And Fred was hilarious.
Fred was hilarious. And in fact, my life coach was a writer on that show, Jeremy Stevens. And it was brilliant. It was so ahead of its time. I didn't realize that your father was in that band. I have to go back and look at some of those.
I'll send you a clip.
Oh, I would love that. And it's seeing him act, how I would love.
Well, he basically plays an ex-con coming out of prison. And that's what he's basically, Italian. It's so funny because I remember a family member, a friend or family member, an older person was really upset with him because, he's playing like a mafiosa. My father was very proud of his heritage. He didn't care,
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so fabulous. I'm looking at a question. Tony's asking, is the immediate family film going to have a theatrical release first? Are you up to that?
Totally. But we don't know what the world is at this point. If you said that 6 months ago, a year ago, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But and now we're going back.
Right.
I mean, when
do you make a streaming deal first? Like
last time how it happened last time was when I went looking for help. I remember this one gentleman said, hey, you haven't gone to the majors. He goes, I can't give you anything. He says, I love your film, but you should go back to the majors before, meaning like some of the other bigger companies. And I went to like, no. He goes, because everybody thought I came and went in 2008. No one realized I never paid it off. So once they saw it and they released it and they put it in, they said, we'll do maybe one or two, we'll do 2 theaters, one in LA, one in New York, And we ended up being over 100 theaters.
Wow.
Because these films do have a big, when you see your film with a group of people, it's a big difference because you hear the music together and you're laughing together.
Of course.
And I loved watching those. I loved watching the screenings. My mom went to so many screenings, God bless her. I said, Mom, you've seen it so many times. She goes, I know. I said, don't you want to hang out here? No, I want to be inside. Okay. She's like 80 years old, going, and she was just so proud and she'd be crying in the end, every time. So it was sweet.
That's lovely. So Denny, is there something else that, like, do you think you'll do? Because now you're going to get the call. Who are you going to call? You're going to call Denny Tedesco when you want a music doc made. Yeah.
Is that okay.
That's what's going to happen.
I do have another call. I do not another one. I do have one in the works. It's totally different. And it's about in 1963 when Kennedy gets killed, the day before, it was the Friday, whatever, the market goes crashing. And the stock market crashed. Everybody assumes it's because of that. It wasn't. What happened was there's a guy, this Italian guy out of Jersey. His name was Tino DeAngelis.
Everybody's Italian. Okay, yeah.
Exactly. Imagine he's 5'5", 250 pounds.
Wow.
The roly-poly guy. He was a hustler. And he was a butcher by trade in the early days. And he was basically taking his meat and selling it to the government for the school programs, and or the food for peace programs. And he was making a lot of money, but then he'd be sued because it was rancid meat or his rancid product. I mean, he was just cutting ways of making more money. So I could see the lights going on me.
No, I was looking,
so
I was gonna
it's
say
like, oh my God, I
something.
feel like I'm in
Yeah.
a dark room.
As long as you stay close, we can see you
Is it
well.
just you, me, and Tony right now? So this guy, Tony, the other Tony, DeAngelis, Tino DeAngelis, he starts figuring out salad oil. He starts bringing it from the Midwest, storing it in these huge tanks out in Jersey, in Bayonne, New Jersey. And it's on this place where Amex, American Express, would basically store the stuff and give you credit to show that you had this product. And what you would do with that credit slip is go to the banks and borrow on it. All right, so this guy's got these tanks filled with oil, and the guy come out, put the stick in, boom, ooh, all right, he's got this much, this much, this much. What no one told these guys sometimes is it was oil on top of water. So when they put the stick in, it's only this much oil or whatever it is.
Right.
Another 30 feet is oil, water. So he's borrowing on nothing. So he sends these hustlers, all these guys in their Cadillacs are going boom, 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 million, 2 million. They're borrowing. It's a Ponzi scheme. Paying. It becomes, when it crashes, it becomes one of the biggest crashes in history, even to this day. It's bigger than like Enron.
Wow.
And so Warren Buffett, my friend Ron Insana, who is a journalist, financial journalist, we went to grade school together. He told me the story. I said, I love this. So he is basically producing a feature on it. So with the license, they got the book, and I interviewed the writer. I interviewed Warren Buffett, and oh my God, it's a hustler. It's such a hustling. This guy was such a scam artist. And then he goes to prison only for 7 years and comes back out and does it again. He had a mystery. He had a wife and a mistress, and both of them are in court together. And when the writer said to his wife, what was he like? He says, oh, he was a good man. He was a good man. It's like, oh my God, he got everybody bullshitted.
Wow.
But it's a great story. So I mean, we're just doing that now. So it's different than music.
Yeah, a little bit different than music, a little bit different than the Beloveds, and yet he was beloved. He kind of got away with stuff, right?
Well, that's it's a weird thing because he destroyed so many lives. It's interesting because there is always another. All of us, there's an evil side or whatever. Not evil, but I just think there's so much character in that guy, and what makes him do that?
Is there a lot of footage of him?
No.
So how do you work around that?
I don't know, but I did. I'll send you the short that we cut. The trailer. This is great. You'll love this. I used footage of my grandfather. It's perfect.
Wow.
It's so perfect. Exactly what he looked like.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was what was his name in The Godfather? Castellano. Oh God, I can't remember his name. I used to know it. He looked exactly like my grandfather. That's what the role. Basically, I think he played. Oh God, I forgot. I just saw it the other night. But no, I love telling the stories. I love meeting people. So
it sounds fantastic, Denny. So okay, so when immediate family, when
I say by summer next year. That's what I want, because you still need good 6 months for a company to know it's coming out. So by summer or end of summer next year. That's my guess.
By that time, I'll hopefully be going to movie theaters. Because I have to see it in the theater. That's a must.
Yeah.
Denny,
but I'm hoping people go to the Facebook page, for
tell us everything. Tell us everything we can do to help to support you.
Right. Basically, it's really going to the Facebook page, the immediate family film page. Of course, the guys have their own page, which is great.
Right.
But we want to make sure that the film is known about so that we can spread the word, because that is so helpful. I know that from experience with the Wrecking Crew. When the film finally comes out, you already built your base, you know, on a
Right.
story that no one knows about.
Well, I'm
So,
gonna put, you're gonna send me the link. I'm gonna put
yeah,
it in the liner notes for this show so that people
you
can
should.
easily hit on it and follow it. And is there anything else people can do to support you through this?
Venmo? No.
Venmo is good.
I take Zelle, checks. I will take checks. I've never used Bitcoin, but I'll take it. I'm not sure what it
Oh,
looks like.
I
I don't
don't
even know what it
even,
looks like.
I don't even know what Bitcoin is. I've been trying to,
I
I
don't
still
either.
don't
So,
understand Bitcoin, but I don't know. All
I
the
know, and I
pornographers ask
hopefully-
for it.
I'll
No,
be
don't
gone
you
by
ever,
then.
didn't you ever get one of those emails that says, I've attached a camera to your computer and I saw you were watching this porn site, and if you don't send me blah, blah, blah in Bitcoin, I'm gonna send it to all your contacts. You've never gotten one of those?
No, I don't do porn.
But it's ironic because like, I don't watch porn, but I get
Yeah.
those emails and I
Wait,
just love them.
no, no, the hustles are scary.
Yeah.
You
They
know,
are,
and
well,
think
they had my,
we're
he
adults,
had
we
my
think
password. He had my
What's that?
password. He had my password. He had my computer password.
Wow.
Yeah, really scary. So I changed that right away. But yeah, really scary.
Yeah, someone
Don't
did
you
that.
notice that you can be talking to someone on the phone and you'll mention something and then you go on your Facebook page and they're giving you ads for exactly what you were just talking about?
Yeah,
I mean, like
just
all
did
the
that
time.
yesterday.
It's
Scares me.
unnerving. Yeah, it's very unnerving.
So,
Danny, thank you so, I am so glad you were worth waiting for 2 years. So what?
oh, I
This
thank
is
you. I'm so glad we got to do this. And I will
absolutely,
see
me
you
too.
in a movie theater in person. soon.
I look forward to the day, and send me some Fernwood Tonight stuff of your dad
I
and
will.
whatever else you can think of. Have a
Yeah, you'll have fun.
wonderful rest of your day and Halloween. And thank you so much for
Thank
doing
you.
this.
Bye.
Take care.
Ciao.
Bye.